Content warning. This video contains discussion of some of the many atrocities committed against Indigenous Australians and the names of several long-dead Aboriginal people. Hey there, folks. My lovely people. Fucking mates. I'm going to take you on a little bit of a trip. For some of you, this will be down memory lane. For others, this will be brand new information. So there is a Melbourne-based film festival called MUFF. Great name for a film festival. It's the Melbourne Underground Film Festival. Now, MUFF had a bit of controversy a while ago. The festival itself is no stranger to controversy. It illegally did a screening of a gay porn film, which, it claimed it was streaming on artistic merit. That's something that I'm not going to, condemn. I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. However, circa 2018, we had the marriage equality plebiscite. So our politicians, rather than just, going with the opinion polls that showed that the vast majority of Australians, I think something like 74%, wanted to have marriage equality, they said, no, we can't possibly just make this controversial decision. We need to hold a plebiscite, which is a kind of like a non-binding referendum. So they spent a huge chunk of money getting Australians to go to the polls to vote on to indicate whether they wanted marriage equality. Vast majority of Australians said yes. In the process, a lot of Australians got, a lot of LGBTQ Australians got exposed to a lot of homophobic abuse and hit pieces published via the media. Shortly after it happened, the director of Melbourne Underground Film Festival decided to post a homophobic screed, calling the results a horrible black day of infamy. The delegates, and saying the decadence and degeneracy of the bourgeois elite has been normalized, and they will use this to destroy us, and that homosexuality is created through child abuse and has been embraced by the majority of Australians as normal. This is obviously some grade A fucking bullshit. Now, there was a great big backlash through media and social media that saw this guy, Richard Wolstencroft, resign. But shortly later, he retracted his resignation. He said, I decided to make the film festival a radical free speech event. I can say anything I want. I can be as racist, homophobic, psychopathic as I wish to be. I'm tired of political correctness. If people have a problem with free speech, if they want to be like social justice warrior, political correctors, essentially, I've got a simple message for them. You can get fucked. So this was this gormless fucking git, Richard Wolstencroft, ruining a perfectly good name there. Wolstencroft, of course, being, I believe, the maiden name of Mary Shelley. No, the married name of Mary Shelley. Or at least Mary Shelley's husband. Now, imagine my fucking surprise when I was looking up information on Jazz Searsby, the guy who I did, or Searby, the guy who I did the last segment on, the Australian Proud Boy, and saw that on that same YouTube channel, well, not Jared's YouTube channel, on the Unshackled YouTube channel, which has podcasts, video podcasts that Jared has been participating in. They've got an ongoing series from Richard Wolstencroft called The Report from Tiger Mountain. Now, this has been going for a little while now. Fucking slow Australian internet. Speed up, you bastard. So, yep, he started this up in, I
Welcome
think,
to
January
this
2019.
new talk show.
Yep, January 2019 there. And as you can see, he's been doing a lot of stuff. Now, there is a little bit of double posting here. So some of these videos are doubled up. Oh, this one's tripled up. The micro-obedience PSYOP. And he's called this the report from Tiger Mountain. Jesus, he's been a busy bastard. Oh, he deleted video number 126. Damn it. Would have liked to have seen that. But we've got things here like sympathy for the globalists and chaos reigns, agent of chaos. So let's have a look here at his first video.
Welcome to
The Fake New Left Politics of Australia Day. I'm planning on going back to this guy's videos a bit because, you know, he's a public figure with an open history of being a homophobic dickbag and saying that he wants to be as, you know, he'll be as racist as he wants to be. He did also, you know, back in the day, he started up the Hellfire Club, which is a Australian kink night. Now, there is nothing wrong with that. I've been to plenty of kink events myself, and I know lots of people who are still in the scene. However, he attempted a few times to do Nazi dress-up nights as part of the Hellfire Club, and they got cancelled due to protests. So he is someone who is at least very fine with racism. Now, I expect that this is going to be about Invasion Day and Australia Day discourse. So let's have a listen to what this gormless shitbag has to say for himself.
To this new talk show. We're going to be talking about contemporary topics here at the Unshackled and Affirmative Right and other related formats all over the internet. And hopefully you'll enjoy these talks, and we will, you know, bring some enlightenment to the new right side of politics, and we'll share different ideas.
The new right. Yep. He's definitely got fashy and alt-right leanings there, I would gather. This is, you know, just a prediction. I've not gone through all of his content yet. I don't know what's his going on is.
Ideas, and hopefully engage with the issues of the zeitgeist and of the now.
That's loud.
I think every year for, I think maybe about the past 5 years, and I guess one of the ways we notice it is again through social media, is the controversy about...
Now, title there, filmmaker. Let's double check what films he's made, just out of interest. Film. Okay. He does have an IMDb profile. Now, some of these I know he was producer on. Let's see, director. 9 credits as director. Yeah, okay. So, The Debt Collector, Second Coming Volume 2, The Second Coming, Beautiful and the Damned, The Last Days of Joe Blow, Spooks Interactive, Pearls Before Swine. Pearls Before Swine, I think, was refused classification, if I remember correctly. The Intruder and Bloodlust. Yeah, no, I will more than accept his proclamation of his credentials as a filmmaker.
About moving the date of Australia Day. And this year, you know, as we head towards Australia Day, it's in about a week now. So there's the usual kind of...
By the way, change the date. Yes, we stand with our Indigenous friends and comrades. Celebrating a national holiday on Invasion Day is fucking trash.
Controversy. You know, some of the new left are beginning to, you know, argue that it's Invasion Day, that it's insulting to Aborigines and various other things. But I did notice a couple of interesting things.
The new left. Although I will appreciate that he is using the same term, the terms the new left and the new right, though he is drawing an equivocacy there. I guess we'll see how he uses the term over the course of his videos. But let us continue.
Things this year. Um, John Birmingham, the great Australian author, who wrote. He died with a falafel in his hand. Now he's about as far left as you can get. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, he's John Birmingham, from what I remember, is a bit progressive, but I would not call him far left. I have seen no calls from him for implementation of socialist policies or anything like that. Bit of a lefty, maybe, but far left, I wouldn't say that.
and I'm still on his Facebook page. I don't know why he doesn't delete me. I've never deleted him. So I occasionally leave the odd right wing kind of thought on his page. I guess he must be one of those few left wing people left who believes in actually talking to people who have different ideas to his own. He's one of those very rare left.
I'm happy to talk to people. Obviously, I'm just starting this channel up, but look, if you want to come on and have a chat at any point, Richard, you're welcome to do so. Uh, we'll, I'm sure we'll both try and be civil, but I'm sure we've got some pretty big disagreements that would probably make us both a bit heated.
Wing people, because there aren't many of them left. I tell you, we should have him like build a statue to the guy. Because anyway, he wrote this article that essentially attacked the notion of the left attacking this Australia Day.
Okay. Let's have a. Let's see if we can find this article here. So we've got a couple of them. From 2016, we've got If Nobody Cares, Then Why Not Change the Date by John Birmingham. And then from 2019, we have Bigger Fish to Fry Than Morrison's Australia Day Pantomime. So let's just have a quick skim of these, see if he's correctly representing his Facebook friends' articles. If nobody cares, why not change the date? The only people who really care about the arrival of the First Fleet are the poor bastards who lost their country because of it. This is very true. For Australia's first people, January 26th is time to reflect on the bayonet, the poisoned waterhole, the blankets infected with smallpox. For the rest of us, Australia Day is just that. Much appreciated day off at the end of the summer drinking season. A chance to burn a few snags and rack up one more skinful before the kids go back to school. Disconnect between our feelings and the date. The date is very easily dealt with because most people could see the benefit themselves if Australia Day were evicted from January and dropped into the calendar elsewhere, a little more convenient. Say at the arse end of the year, in the long dry spell after Labor Day. This is very true, John Birmingham. We have our holidays are public holidays are very front loaded, and we could do with some more out the back of the year. So just let's have a little look down here at the end. If we mean our National Day to be a celebration, we could do no better than celebrating that freedom we have offered them and all who became them for them. But if we mean our National Day to be a celebration, we will also have to do much better than holding it on a date that commemorates an invasion which all but displaced the continent's original peoples. Indigenous Australians have made great contributions to the civilization which grew out of the Gulag built here in 1788. As artists, as scientists, soldiers, sportsmen and women, more reason to have pride. Oh yes, so this is new Australians are created each year on Australia Day. Having it on that date for them is a bit tacky as well. If the National Day is about so much more than the arrival of white man and his guns, what is the harm in moving the day to somewhere it can be marked without the burden of that history, especially if we get another piss up at the dry end of the year? Fully fucking agreed, John. So that was from 2016. Let's see if he's changed his tune at all by 2019. We have Bigger Fish to Fry Than Morrison's Australia Day Pantomime. This is an article about the dead putrescent waters of the Murray-Darling. So yeah, this is ecological disaster caused by horrific government and corporate mismanagement that has led to mass fish die-offs. So yeah, saying that Australia Day is not as important as the ecological mismanagement in our country, which I agree with. And ending, but seriously, let's lose our shit over the administrivia of Australia Day's tradition of heritage, stretching all the way back to 1994. Yes, Australia Day became legally a thing in '94. I do think it had some. Like that's when it became a federal public holiday. Do believe it had its origin in some states before that, which I think was connected to a white supremacist organisation called the Australian Natives Organisation, by which it meant white people born in Australia, not Indigenous Australians. I will double check that information later, and if it specifically comes up from Richard here that this is a if he tries to pull that shit, we might have to check in on that soon.
Idea. He said it's kind of a losing battle in a way. And he said there's also a lot more important things to talk about. And I actually completely agree.
Whoa! Holy fucking misrepresentation, Batman. Holy fucking misrepresentation. Yeah, bigger things to worry about is, the destruction of our environment. And he said that the big thing to worry about here, he still does think that Australia Day is, needs to be moved, but he's decrying Morrison, who is our current Prime Minister, Morrison's Australia Day pantomime, not the left's. I don't know if you're just, don't understand the media you consume there, mate, or if you're deliberately representing Birmingham's article.
I agree with that, and I do think it is a losing battle because around the same time there was a poll. I think I'm not sure.
Support for changing the date has increased year after year for the last good while.
It was published in the Age and published in Herald Sun and the Australian. That said around 75% of people do not support the changing of Australia Day, which tells you what.
And that was so. Let's see if we can find some polling on that. Let's see if we can find some. Okay. So 75% in 2019, when that video was made, were like, nah, we don't want to change anything. This year, only 29% of the people that they surveyed said that they were doing something something to mark the day, down from 34% over the previous year and 40% in 2019. So less people are celebrating Australia Day. Over half of this year's respondents, 53%, said they treat Australia Day as just another public holiday, which is the highest record since 2015. Another 6% said they were working on the day, and 12% said they didn't know. So this seems to be... Okay. Support towards a separate national holiday. Question. It has been suggested that Australia should have a separate national holiday to recognise Indigenous Australians. So the choices here, we have support a separate day and keep Australia Day, support a separate day to replace Australia Day, don't support a separate day, don't know, and then just totaling. So this isn't quite the question that I'm interested in, but 35% of people want to support a separate day and keep Australia Day. 18% want a separate day to replace Australia Day, and 35% do not support a separate day. So it's a total of 53% support like an Indigenous Peoples Recognition Day setting up. But this isn't the question. What they've asked here isn't the actual important question at hand. Because they're asking people, do you want to get rid of Australia Day, when really we want to find out what polling is on moving Australia Day.
Well, few of them.
So according to... Okay, so Channel 9 from 2021, nearly half all Australians oppose Australia Day date change. So he's just said that 75% of people opposed a date change in 2019. Now, we already know that he misrepresents statistics, but for this, we'll take his word on it. He could be correct, he could be incorrect. This is the kind of thing we know that he misrepresented. If he did intentionally misrepresent the information from before, it was to hew to his point. So either he's lied and it stayed flat. So nearly 50% of people are opposed to changing the date. Just 28% of Australians want the date to be moved. Okay, let's jump through the Age and Sydney Morning Herald. 48% against the date change, and a further quarter neither agreed nor disagreed. Okay. Okay, here we are. We've got actual total information. So we've got, to what extent do you agree or disagree with the campaign to change the date of Australia Day from January 26th? But what we want is support of change the date over time. Okay. So we'll I'll have a look off stream and see if I can find some more specific information on how that's shifted over time. But it appears that less people are against it than they used to be.
What, maybe 20, 25% do support it? I mean, considering maybe 5 or 10% don't care either way. So maybe 15, 20% do want to change it, which is not really a majority. You know what I mean? So it's not a popular
Just
idea.
speaking hypotheticals here, he is.
And I do think with John Birmingham that there are many other important issues on the left.
So in this instance, I don't care whether or not the idea is popular. I care whether it's the right thing to do. And I do think that moving Australia Day to a date that isn't, the date that white ancestors showed up, planted a flag, and began Indigenous genocide. Yeah.
I mean, this is the whole thing with today's contemporary left. I mean, the left used to be about, the main issues of...
And by the way, I'm not saying I want to force through an unpopular idea. I'm saying that I want to try and change people's minds. I'll probably do a proper video talking about Invasion Day and why the date of Australia Day should be changed, and Invasion Day itself should be turned into a day of mourning. Like, I'm happy for us to keep Invasion Day as a federal public holiday and then set up a different day as Australia Day. Like, what Australian doesn't want more fucking public holidays? I mean, honestly.
Of the left, and I didn't always disagree with them, is that they would argue about economic equity, which is something that dates back to Marxism in many ways. It dates back to the ideas that we live in a world that's ruled over by a mega wealthy elite. I guess it was called the bourgeois elite under classical Marxism. Under, I guess, the politics of the new right, we call it the globalist elite. But essentially,
I'm sorry, but the globalist thing is a giant fucking conspiracy theory. Yeah, no, you've bought into a bunch of bullshit there. It's just like, you can explain it all through the mechanics of materialism and market forces and selfishness and the accumulation of power. The world isn't fucked because of some secretive globalist cabal. The world is fucked because we've allowed capitalism to fuck it.
essentially, this is the same concept, and essentially, the left and the right have the same enemies today, and this is why you're seeing so many.
I disagree with this. I think that the right is the enemy of the left, not that the globalists. I don't mean individuals on the right. I mean the structures of oppression that keep actual proper reform and change from happening.
Working class people attracted to the new right as it begins to engage in, I guess, a kind of politics that is supportive of the working class and the lower middle class and the middle class. And you see this with Donald Trump. You see this particularly with the yellow.
So Donald Trump did engage in a lot of pro-working class rhetoric. However, he never actually followed through with policy items or anything that actually made things better for the middle class. His trade wars cost a lot of jobs because, when you engage in a trade war, you fuck over your own country's ability to export to the country that you're trade warring with, and that resulted in a lot of economic turmoil that fucked over middle class and lower class people. Um, yeah. So cool. Empty populism can be used to appeal to people around class interests. I agree with this, at least.
Vests, which has been a huge movement in France, which is incredibly surprising because it has engaged people who are on the right and the left who are working in unity against the elite.
Uh, the French do admittedly know how to fucking riot. Like, they do not put up with any shit. Oop, accidentally skipped back
It
there.
is a losing battle because around the same time there was a poll, the politics of the
Oh,
new right,
it
we
shows
call it
me
the
here.
global states, etc., etc. This to me is the class of people that I think we can all unite and fight against. I mean, maybe they're not always up to mischief, these people. I think someone like Soros is definitely up to mischief most of the time. But
Ah, yes, the evil and vile Soros. Don't worry, I will be cashing my own Soros checks soon. I mean, I've started a video channel that's like left-leaning politics. That means Soros has to come along and cash me up, right? Right? No, no. Soros is just an investment. Yeah, he's just a capitalist investor who has a somewhat progressive leaning. He's by no means up there amongst the wealthiest people, wealthiest, most powerful or influential people.
some of them, Richard Branson, people like this. I mean, I guess in a weird way, and this is the weird thing about Donald Trump. Donald Trump comes from this elite class, this elite billionaire class. But it's clear, at least.
Citation needed as to whether Donald Trump ever actually managed to become a billionaire or maintain his billionaireship before his presidency. He has undoubtedly made a lot of money off his presidency, though.
I mean, at least at some level, he is not fully about just that class. I mean, he does have a pay.
He absolutely is much more concerned with the well-being of the wealthy. The his uh, Trump's populism was an act to gain power and adoration.
Patriotic nationalist side that I do believe is authentic. And this is why he comes across so different. And this is why he's also such a threat to this mega elite class. Because they go, hang on a minute, we're all just about enriching us mega elite billionaires and our cronies and our puppets and various things. You actually seem to be interested in America.
Donald Trump spent his entire presidency enriching himself. I'm sure I'll have need to go into it properly in a video later, but oh fucking. So he charged the Secret Service. Oh, he refused to follow the emoluments clause and didn't disengage. Didn't disinvest from his businesses. He just said, "Oh, it's being managed by my son." He charged the Secret Service for staying in hotels that and resorts that he ran, and through that made a lot of money. He received a lot of money from foreign governments and massive companies, quite directly by them hiring out, hundreds of rooms at a time at his hotels just to give him money and get in the good books of the president. I'm sure that many other things will crop up. His big final push for like his donation drive to stop the steal um, had a clause where 50% of all donations would be going directly to Trump and his expenses. So yeah, he's definitely enriched himself, and I would challenge you to point to even a single policy of his, enacted policy of his, that successfully made things better for lower and middle class Americans.
And protecting Americans. And then even if some of it is fake, as many people accuse him of being, and he's just engaging nationalism for its political gain to himself.
He
I
is.
don't believe it is. I think he's, I think obviously he's engaged in a fight between this elite and
Trump
his own
cares about
nationalist
Trump.
interests.
Trump is so much a part of the elite that he was chum buddy buddies with Jeffrey Epstein and joked about how much Jeffrey Epstein liked diddling young girls, raping children, that thing that Epstein was probably killed over in jail so that he couldn't rat on powerful people.
But I think it's authentic, and that he's not obviously always able to get what he wants. I think we'll discuss this a bit later on when we talk about the wall. But I think the Australia Day controversy really it is a losing battle for the left. I mean, and this.
Again, I do think that to my knowledge, support for changing the date of Australia Day has increased over the years. The size of the protests have grown year over year. Obviously, this year, the pandemic restrictions threw a spanner in that works. But yeah, support for changing the date is growing, and it's the right thing to do. So I will argue that we should.
What do they always call it? The main complaint is that it's Invasion Day. Okay, well, let's think about what it commemorates.
It
It commemorates the First Fleet. Now, were we invading when the prisoners arrived here? First of all, it was a bunch of...
Yes. Yes, it was an invasion. We came, we placed our flag. I don't know the exact timeline of the declaration of Terra Nullius, but Terra Nullius was the legal-ish, or the legal principle of us declaring that Australia was an uninhabited continent, when in fact there were, hundreds of different groups of Aboriginal people living here, making use of the land, and we basically looked at them and went, "Oh, they're not people." I think it was, I think it was Captain Cook who was given orders from the Crown to negotiate a treaty with the Indigenous peoples, and just ignored that for the Australians. And then when he got to New Zealand, negotiated a treaty with the Maoris because the Maoris were bigger and more intimidating, and had a much higher population density with which to threaten his people. So yes, we did invade, and the invasion. That's the point of time where the invasion started. That's when we, relocated the First Fleet to its final disembarking place, and planted our flag, and declared this entire country to be property of the Crown.
Guards and some people from the British Navy who bring a bunch of prisoners here, who are going to set up a colony, a penal colony in Australia. And now, I'm not entirely sure about the concept of white privilege, but I think the people brought here as prisoners probably would not come under the category of white privilege. You could maybe...
So we viewed, the British government viewed the colonial prisoners as a way to set up a penal colony. They viewed them as human, and after a certain amount of, a certain number of years working, they got their freedom back. We didn't view Indigenous Australians as legally being people. Yes, white privilege definitely existed when comparing the prisoner settlers to Indigenous Australians. Arcadian Bell. From Wikipedia, passages consisted of 10 civil officers, 112 Marines, including officers, 28 wives and 17 children of Marines, 81 free people, 504 male convicts, and 192 female convicts, making the total number of free people 348, and the total number of prisoners 696, combining to a grand total of 1,044 people. So yes, this was in fact the vanguard of our invasion. That's a pretty high uh yeah, that's yeah, much killing
Make the argument that some of the naval
resulted.
officers could fall under the character of white privilege, but really, I mean, they're being sent to the arsehole end of the world to basically run a prison. I don't think Australia began as an invasion. So I think the idea that the first
Australia absolutely began as an invasion. Like, there was even resistance fighters. Pemulwuy led a lot of the early resistance until he was eventually killed. Power Beta Pemulwuy. Yeah, no, it was an invasion.
fleet represents an invasion is a nonsense. I think the idea, obviously, we came here first, we established penal colonies, and we established other colonies, and that these colonies eventually grew. And then eventually these penal colonies became colonial.
So these penal colonies weren't established on empty land. They were established in in Australia on the lands of the people of the Eora and Darug nations initially. I don't know all of the individual groups off the top of my head. The area I'm in is Bigot country, which was the tribal group that Pemulwuy, the aforementioned resistance fighter, was from. So yeah, nope. We came in, killed and displaced people from their land in order to set up our penal colonies. This was invasion. It was an invasion that took a lot of time because Australia is a big fucking country, but it was still invasion.
And then the process of colonialism began. I think once the process of colonialism began, which I think would have been in the early part of the 19th century, early 18.
I I would say that it's all colonialism. Maybe has a specific definition of colonialism that he's working off. Let's look up colonialism. The policy or practice of acquiring full or partial control over another country, occupying it with settlers, and exploiting it economically. Yeah. Even just setting up a single penal colony and displacing the people there, well, I say displacing and murdering the people there is colonialism, is invasion. Colonialism began as soon as we started settling. And by we, I mean the British, which is mostly my heritage, so.
In hundreds. Then there are arguments, you could make arguments that there were nasty things done along the way to achieving the nation that is now called Australia. I don't disagree with many of the
There were many nasty things that were done.
nasty things that were done in the senses. I don't say they didn't happen. I think they definitely did
I'm
happen.
glad to
But I
hear
think
that you
the
don't
idea
deny
that
that
we're
part
all
of reality,
collectively
mate.
responsible for it now. I mean, that's utterly absurd.
So, are we individually responsible for the things that happened in the past? No, I don't think that we are. Like, that our ancestors did. However, we are responsible for the societies and systems that we inherit based off that, and the ongoing oppression that the people that we displaced and fucked over face and to this day. And there is like colonialism and genocide never ended. We had like explicit genocidal policies up until the 1980s with the Stolen Generation and taking Indigenous children from their families to be educated under white culture and to break their cultural and genetic heritage and lineages. That's an act of genocide that only ended 4 or so decades ago. That's overt. And even then, while the policies that we now have are mostly not explicitly racist or genocidal, they are still used in that way. So it's still an ongoing thing. So there was actually a temporary suspension to the Racial Discrimination Act for the Northern Territory intervention, which happened under a Labor government, where we sent the army in to fuck up Indigenous communities in the name of compassion and progress. So yeah, no, the idea that this is something in the past that we don't have to take responsibility for, that the effects of how we invaded and massacred Indigenous Australians aren't felt or don't need to be in some way corrected. It's just bullshit.
And so I think it's just a nonsensical argument that Australia began as invasion day. It started, if anything, as a penal colony. If anyone wasn't free in Australia, it was the white people who were here.
Wow. The Indigenous people that were killed really, really appreciate that they weren't in chains. Although, to my knowledge, there was at least some degree of early Australian Indigenous slavery. Let's have a look, though. Um, Indigenous slavery in Australia. Here we are. Slavery in Australia. Da da. Many Indigenous Australians were also forced into various forms of slavery and unfree labour from colonisation, and this persisted for some Indigenous Australians until the 1970s. Jesus fuck. And he's talking about this as, oh, no, this guy does not know what he's talking about. Labourers were also imported from the Pacific Islands, Africa, India, Bangladesh, China, and Japan, and employed in various degrees of slavery and unfree labour. Chattel slavery, where people are treated as personal property of the owners, existed in practice despite laws against it. The most extreme instances include the blackbirding of Pacific Islanders, who were kidnapped or recruited through coercion from their home islands and forced to work in Queensland. Legal protections varied and were sometimes not enforced, particularly with workers who were effectively forced to work for their employees and would often go unpaid. Yeah, let's so Indigenous labour. From the early stages of British colonisation right up to the 1960s, Aboriginal Australians and Torres Strait Islanders were used as unpaid labour in many sectors such as the pastoralist industry, bêche de mer harvesting, pearling and the boiling down industry, marsupial eradication and prostitution, and were also used as household servants. In return for this labour, the Indigenous people were given portions of inexpensive commodities such as tobacco, rum, slop clothing, flour, and offal. Trade in Aboriginal children and adolescents was often sought after. Children were often taken from Aboriginal campsites after punitive expeditions, and they were used either as personal servants or as labour by the colonists who took them. Sometimes these children were taken very far away from their lands and traded to other colonists. For instance, Murray Durack described how one of her relatives in the Kimberley region bought an Aboriginal boy from Queensland for a tin of jam. Jesus fuck. So in the pastoralist sector, unpaid labour also allowed Aboriginal people to stay on their land instead of being forced off or massacred. Even in cases after Federation in 1901, where Aboriginal labour was legislated as requiring payment in money, these wages were often kept in bank accounts that could not be accessed by them, with the money being redirected elsewhere by government bureaucracies. Oh wow, government-backed forced unpaid labour. In the 1960s, famous protests against these working conditions, such as the Wave Hill Walk-Off, brought international awareness to the issue. Although changes were made, modernisation and automisation of the pastoralist industry allowed the leaseholders to remove Aboriginal people from the land, often dumping them in townships with minimal facilities. Yeah, no, bullshit that the Aboriginal people were all nice and happy and free under this situation. Fucking so much bullshit.
Well, most of them were prisoners. The Aboriginals were still free. I imagine they looked at us and thought, who the fuck are these people? You know what I mean? And then some of them were friendly and some of them were not friendly. And, so, then began this kind of relationship that has been positive and negative over the years, and sometimes very negative, I'm happy to admit. But I think, and there's a real lesson here about,
We've fucked
funnily
over
enough,
our,
there's a real right-wing lesson.
like, the degrees to which we have fucked over our Indigenous population, and in some ways continue to do so, is staggering. For him to sit here and equivocate and go, oh yeah, we've done some bad stuff, but they didn't have it off as bad as the fucking settler blah blahs. Oh, my brain has dropped a word. They didn't have it as bad as the prisoner colonialists. No, there's a word. The convicts. The convicts. You'll get old one day too, younglings, and you will have problems with your brain remembering words midway through a sentence. Age is one hell of a drug. All right, let's continue. But yeah, no, it's
Here about border control. I mean, can you imagine if there was an Aboriginal Donald Trump who had somehow managed to secure the borders of the west coast of Australia, or the east coast of Australia, and we weren't able to land. I mean, basically.
Yes, a disparate collection of tribal peoples. Hang on, let's have a look at a map. Map of Indigenous Australia. Here we go. Let's have a look here. The zoomable version. This is what we want. This is the good shit. So this is a map, not of just the different tribes, of the different language groups and nations. So we've got Darug and Eora here around Sydney. We've got Wiradjuri area up here. Like, Australia wasn't just a nation of Indigenous people. Australia was many, many different Indigenous cultures. And Australia is fucking huge. He's presenting a hypothetical of, the Indigenous Australians, if they had have properly defended their borders like Donald Trump wants to do, then maybe they never would have been colonised. Jesus fuck, man. So ahistorical.
We wouldn't be here, you know what I mean? So I think the actual case of the Aborigines is a great case for securing your borders, because look what happens when you don't. Eventually, people.
Now, I'm not completely certain, but I believe Aborigines is considered to be somewhat offensive. Aboriginal Australians or Indigenous Australians or Aboriginals. Yeah, minor point, but.
People come here, they start off as a penal colony, they start off as immigrants, refugees. You could even make a case that prisoners are like refugees, and then.
You can even make a case that prisoners are like refugees. Yes, people who were committing petty crimes in London and were rounded up and put onto prison ships and just sent across the water, like people fleeing warfare and catastrophe to try and find a safer life. Do you even understand the words you speak, man?
Then suddenly the refugees get this idea, hang on a minute, we're going to be colonial. This is going to turn from a refugee situation or from a kind of.
They're not refugees, you monster.
Immigrant situation into a colonial operation. And so I think we are facing that threat. And I think that the lesson of the Aborigines is stark proof that this is a real issue. So, and I even know actual Aboriginals do think this, but of course they're not the ones.
He's not a monster. At least I don't think he is. He's a mung bean, though. He's a absolute fucking mung bean.
That ever get onto the ABC. And this is something else I wanted to talk about, which I think is kind of amusing. Have you ever noticed that proof that this is a real issue? So, and I even know actual Aboriginals do think this, but of course they're not the ones that ever get onto the ABC. And this is something else I wanted to.
So there are a few token Aboriginal Australians who get. There's one in particular, I can't remember her name, that gets carted out any time the right needs an opinion. So he is here. He's going. I have some Indigenous friends that agree with me, and is ignoring the opinion of the majority of Indigenous Australians.
Talk about, which I think is kind of amusing. Have you ever noticed that when you ever see an ethnic minority on the ABC or SBS, they always talk the ideology of the white upper middle class left liberal? You know what I mean? Like if
What? Um, I don't know exactly what he means here. Let's continue letting him speak.
ever there's someone who's from the Muslim community, he shares the ideas of like an upper middle class white latte sipping, because essentially they're racist.
No, it's because cultural integration works. It's a nice, slow process, and people adapt to the values of the society that they live in, and that like white liberal upper middle class values are values of inclusion and tolerance that they benefit from. Like immigrants and non-white Australians benefit from those values. Now, we've got bigoted immigrants, sure thing, and also ABC and SBS are, publicly funded broadcasters, and they have an actual responsibility to not platform deranged and dangerous views. So they're not going to go and find explicitly racist or bigoted people of minority groups to interview for standard pieces. Like, unless they're doing like a, deep dive into a particular issue, they might find someone a bit more controversial, but I don't know how you find this weird, man.
They will only allow onto their media people who agree with them. You know what I mean? Well, they're not only racist, but they're not.
That's not racism. Like, so you're accusing the ABC of having an ideological bias. An ideological bias, like if an organization has an ideological bias and finds other people who fit that ideological bias, that's not being racist. That's just following an ideological bias. Now, the ABC, people on the right often tout the ABC as being this far left, pinko, commie loving organization. It's not. There have been independent analyses done into the bias of the ABC, and they keep coming back with the fact that it has a centre right bias. And I suspect that that's been shifting a little bit further right, in that there's been less explicitly left-wing content recently, due to increasing pressure from successive conservative governments who've been installing people in leadership positions to dismantle certain parts of the ABC that were more progressively aligned.
Not interested in diversity of opinion. Do you ever see many Muslims who I don't know, have a more conservative view in relation to gay marriage and in relation to the relationships between men and women? I mean, lots of different topics Muslims can be quite conservative on. Even mild Muslims can be relatively conservative.
Yeah, many religious people can be conservative on, but we know that you think that gay marriage is an abhorrent thing, that the people voting yes on the plebiscite was a black stain on Australia's history. Your words, mate.
On many of these issues. Do you ever see them on the ABC? The same with Aborigines. Do you think the Aboriginal community loves the lesbian and gay community? No, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm just going to anecdote Andy, but I'm yet to meet an Indigenous person who's said bigoted things around me towards the LGBT community. I'm sure there's a few that have regressive ideas, but so what he's advocating for here is for our national broadcaster to platform bigots. Our national broadcasters have a responsibility to engage in responsible discourse.
Well, there's some that are, But you ever find the ones that aren't? Like Anthony Mundine is here for on, I don't know, Q&A talking about his views. I mean, this is, it's because left-wing, upper middle-class white liberals.
Now, I will point out that the Q&A often does platform bigoted viewpoints. Yeah, I don't know how many bigots of colour it has on.
Keep minorities around like pets, and Gavin McInnes made this point. They keep them around like pets, and they only allow the ones onto their media who.
Yes, quoting Gavin McInnes, founder of, you know, founder of the Proud Boys, the right-wing terrorist organisation, or at least it's been classified as such in Canada. Um, Gavin McInnes, who I believe has said a bunch of straight-up racist shit and encouraged violence and intolerance. Yes, yes, Gavin McInnes. We will take his word and trust what he says about the left as being accurate.
who agree with them, which means they actually don't love diversity. Because if they did love diversity, they would allow these communities or these people from these different communities who have varied views. Some of them quite conservative. Some of the views of the Muslim community make the alt right look like social justice warriors. For God's
Jesus Christ. So we've gotten well away from Australia Day discourse, and he's just going on about how he wishes that our national broadcaster platformed more racist people who happened to be in minority groups. I, I disagree with you, mate.
sake, you know what I mean? Do they allow them on the ABC or Q&A or any of these bloody talk shows? Of course they don't, because this.
I'm sure they do from time to time. Oh, there we are. Again, you do misrepresent information. I don't feel like digging through Q&A's back history. Hang on, let's see. Let's have a quick look here. Q&A, LGBT on the ABC. Q&A special between a rock and a hard place. Let's see if they have got an Anthony Mundine. I'm probably... Oh. So... Doesn't look like Anthony Mundine's been on Q&A. Did they have Israel Folau? I can't spell for shit. Now... Oh, look! Now, this was admittedly... Yeah, this was January 2019. But... Was Israel Folau on this panel? I don't know.
I wish that we could have more expressions of love
Hey,
and
Penny Wong.
forgiveness rather than condemnation when it came to belief. And I wish that public figures, politicians, sporting stars, etc.
I don't think...
He doesn't speak for all Christians. Freedom, etc.
No, it doesn't appear that...
But I would make this point.
Doesn't appear that they platformed Israel Folau there. Well, good on them for being responsible.
This is all about what Jordan Peterson said, which is the neo-left.
Of course you like Jordan Peterson. Jesus Christ. I'll get to you, Jordan.
Infiltration of media, the universities.
Hang on, what phrase was that?
Or any of these bloody talk shows? Of course they don't, because this is all about what Jordan Peterson said, which is the neo-left, kind of postmodern Marxist kind of infiltration.
Ah, yes, the postmodern Marxism. Postmodernity is... Marxism is a materialist philosophy. Postmodernism is an anti-materialist philosophy. There's a lot of contradiction there. Also, Peterson's ramblings about this particular topic do harken back to him talking about, Peterson talking about neo-Marxism harkens back to the Nazi thing of neo-Bolshevism. Um, uh, yeah, Peterson engages in a lot of fascist-adjacent rhetoric, let's just say.
Of media, the universities, pushing this kind of divisive agenda of
The
everybody is
infiltration of
oppressed
media in the
outside of,
universities.
I guess, the white male.
So media uh, doesn't generally have like an extreme less bias like conservatives like this seem to think. Media is capitalist controlled generally and tends to go with whatever the market share will get them. If inclusivity gets them more business, they'll go with inclusivity. Our national broadcasters do have a responsibility, a legal responsibility to, not promote racist or bigoted bullshit. I'm surprised that he's upset about that. Yeah. Uh, so he's going to go into the plight of the poor, oppressed white man, I think.
Patriarchy, who we are the great evil,
The
supposedly,
patriarchy.
that's just marching through the world. Well, you know,
We live in a male-dominated society, and patriarchal systems of oppression are a real thing. I'll get into that in another video.
I mean, it's just simply not the case. And I think this whole issue with Australia Day kind of reflects on that and reflects the kind of problems we're seeing in our society. And these
Yes. Problems we're seeing in our society, wanting to be respectful of the experiences of oppressed people. Oh, it's awful. How could we?
kind of these kind of arguments are kind of like fake arguments. These are kind of non-issues, and I find a lot of it a distraction because I think it distracts from. And even John Birmingham made that point that there are better things for the left to do
You're lying about his article, you sleazy bastard.
than to run around complaining about Australia Day. And I couldn't actually agree with him more. I was going to completely agree with him about that. There are definitely, I've even heard Jordan Peterson talk about that.
This just in. We're capable of caring about and working towards multiple things at once.
He will talk about, the left, the way the left is always crapping on about identity politics, which Jordan Peterson doesn't like, and I don't like some aspects of left-wing identity politics.
You crapped on about, like, right-wing identity politics in this plenty. The right loves identity politics. They just don't like it when people are leftwards, so they use identity politics as a buzzword to say those lefty things I don't like.
I don't hate it. I don't hate it maybe as much as he does, but there are definitely other things the left could be doing, and particularly the area where the left is strong is when it talks about economic equity, where it talks about unions, where it talks about getting a decent day's pay for a decent day.
Gosh darn lefties, stay out of spheres of social progress. Just focus on the economic process. Is this guy a tanky? Is he a bit of a Nazbol? No, I don't think he is. He seems capitalist to his core.
Day's work. You don't hear talk of class struggle or the working class or many of these kind of traditional left wing ideas even discussed. It's always talk
That's you're not moving in the same lefty circles as I am, then, mate.
now of multicultural tolerance and tolerance of the LBG community and this whole kind of new identity politics.
How dare the left try to promote tolerance and acceptance of a wide range of people? They should just focus on the working class, as long as those working class are white and straight. Fuck you, man.
The whole gender issue, men versus women, kind of misinterest politics of the new feminism. Seems to me like
Holy string of buzzwords, Batman.
fake politics. And as I said, I did do a talk that's online on cultural Marxism. I was actually invited to do this talk by a group of Marxist lawyers. They knew I was someone connected to the new right, the alt-right. And they asked me to give a talk on, they call cultural Marxism the pseudo-left.
Oh, wow. So he got talking to tankies and Nazbols, I guess. I won't go over this today, but I'll have to see if I can try and find his cultural Marxism talk.
Which is a good term, which is the fake left. to their conference of lawyers in
Let's
the
go
United
back there.
Kingdom. So cultural Marxism, the pseudo-left, which is a good term, which is the fake left, to their conference of lawyers in the United Kingdom. So I actually shot it just over there in front of my collection of books on Marxism, and I shot this little address that's online. It's about half an hour long, where I talk about cultural Marxism. So, I think it all relates, and this is a kind of fake politics we're seeing, this whole Australia Day issue, and it's just bullshit. We need to forget about it, and I think...
So I just want to say this idea that leftist politics and organization can work without engaging in issues of identity is bullshit. Intersectionality is very important. There are certain overlapping fields where how race, gender, sexual identity, and all of that creates unique vectors of oppression that leftist organizers need to understand and be able to utilize in order to help all of the working class. These non-class-based issues won't magically evaporate if we manage to bring about a socialist utopia. We manage to evaporate if we bring about a socialist utopia. Sorry, my brain's just blanked on me. It won't magically evaporate, and it makes the actual process of organizing and building a movement easier. If people in minority groups are still workers, and if they don't feel like they're being respected or represented by workers' movements, they won't join workers' movements. So even if someone personally believes that class is the only or most important thing, they should learn how to engage in and utilize intersectional politics because it's tactically advantageous. Now, I happen to think that intersectional politics has merit on its own, even outside of, Marxian or socialist goals. But even if you're someone who doesn't, you should still be engaging in it.
I think with this recent poll, 75% of Australians, are supportive of Australia Day. So leave the fucking thing alone. And there was a guy from Yothu who came out and said that, yes, he supports Australia Day being there, and he would like to educate other members of the Aboriginal community. This is the same...
Now, let's see. Does Yothu Yindi on Australia Day? Yes, he does. So one of the band's founders said he do not support protests on the national holiday or changing the date. So this at least... So Yothu Yindi is an Indigenous Australian band that had a fantastic piece of music called Treaty about Indigenous Australian, the need for a treaty with Indigenous Australians, which was never organised in the past. Wants to celebrate unity and redemption. He was part of an Australian Day celebration. He'd like to celebrate because of his survival. He's got his black power. For me, I'd like to celebrate because of my survival. I've got my black power culture and I still carry on. I think most people... this is the multicultural minister we've gotten through to now. Cool. So congratulations on one of your two sources that you've used not being misrepresented.
Guy who also said recently that he found the behaviour of Sudanese gangs to be insulting to the Indigenous Australians.
Yeah, you're correct there. Arcadian Bell. Sorry. Every time I read your name, Arcadian Bell, it reads, my brain goes, Arcanibadal. No, Arcadian Bell. Yeah, he's very much this. If an issue doesn't personally affect me, then it must not matter. Seems to be Richard's through line a lot of the time.
That the way many Sudanese gangs are behaving in Melbourne is very insulting to Indigenous community. Which
jump down.
That the way many Sudanese gangs are behaving the members of the Aboriginal community. This is the same guy who also said recently that he found the behaviour of Sudanese gangs.
No. Stupid YouTube. We'll get back to this.
I've even heard Jordan Peterson talk about that
Fuck Jordan Peterson.
struggle, or the working class, or many of these kind of traditional left-wing ideas. Even on they call cultural Marxism the pseudo left. And this is the kind of fake politics we're seeing, this whole Australia Day issue, and it's just bullshit. We need to forget about it. And I think with this recent poll, 75% of Australians, are supportive of Australia Day. So leave the fucking thing alone. And there was a guy from Yothu who came out and said that yes, he supports Australia Day being there, and he would like to educate other members of the Aboriginal community. This is the same guy who also said recently that he found the behaviour of Sudanese gangs to be insulting to the Indigenous Australians. That the way many Sudanese gangs are behaving in Melbourne is very insulting to Indigenous community, which I think.
To my understanding, the whole reporting on the Sudanese gangs thing was very disproportionate, and that not much violence was actually committed. Now, of course, any gang-related violence is a bad thing, but I think it largely, the reporting got used to crack down quite violently on Sudanese youth. Again, this is just my recollection. I could be off there, but I think it was a bit of a media-manufactured nothing burger.
I think is fantastic, which is, I think, something that the new right needs to be, we need to interview this guy, we need to get him on side, because this is exactly the kind of thing, there's always, when you hear complaints about Sudanese gangs, the accusation from the left is that, it's just a bunch of, kind of like, alt-right or far-right racists having a whinge about some community, and it's blown out of proportion. Well, when you're hearing people from the Vietnamese community complaining about it,
lots of people are, targets of vulnerable targets of disinformation. When the media is reporting on a thing, they will take that thing to be true.
You're hearing an Aboriginal elder like the guy from Yothu complaining about it. You begin to see this as a broader issue, and that this characterisation of the left is false, and that we do have a problem with Sudanese crime in Melbourne, and that the Australia Day.
Okay, he's harping on about this, so let's have a look at this. How much of a problem is Sudanese crime in Melbourne? Okay. Let's have a bit of a look here. So we've got Diversity Council of Australia, facts on Victorian African crime. Much has been made in the media lately of Australia being in the grip of an African youth crime wave. Is this really a case? Statistics show Australians born in Sudan make up 0.1% of Victoria's population and constitute 1% of alleged offenders in Victoria. So what does alleged offender mean? Okay, alleged offenders in Victoria is people that the police have linked to crimes, although they may not necessarily have been found guilty or been charged. So the police, which are a famously racist organisation, allege that a lot of Sudanese people are involved in crimes, disproportionate to their population. So while there is an overrepresentation of Sudanese born in Victorian crime statistics, including serious assault, those offenders account for a minority of the actual proportion of crime experienced by Australians. You are, in fact, more than 25 times more likely to be seriously assaulted by someone born in Australia or New Zealand than someone born in Sudan or Kenya. Excellent. Rather than Australia being in the grip of an African youth crime wave, statistics indicate that we are actually safer than we've been in over a decade. In 2017, Victoria experienced its biggest crime drop in 12 years, where the total crime rate fell by 6.2%. Crime perpetrated by youth in Victoria under 25 years of age has also fallen from half of all incidents in 07-08 to 40%. Why do we here talk about there being out-of-control African gangs in the Australian community? In short, the answer is selective media coverage of ethnicity in Australian crime reporting, according to an analysis by the Australian Police Accountability Project. Ethnicity is not typically discussed in media coverage of crimes involving Caucasian people. The suspect's ethnic background is deemed irrelevant. However, where similar crimes involve those of African background, the media hones in on the ethnicity of the suspect and calls on community leaders to comment. Pattern of coverage is not unique to Australia. So yeah, it's people who the police think are connected to crimes, and you are far more likely, statistically likely, to be, even proportionally, to be assailed by any particular Caucasian person than any particular Sudanese person. So, yeah, look, complicated issue. I won't blame him for misunderstanding it, but he is still spreading misinformation.
The issue is basically a load of bullshit. We need to get on and celebrate Australia Day. Be proud of this nation. You know, it's not always behaved perfectly, but we can all work
There's plenty about this nation that's really fucked up. I'm sure we'll get into that in future videos.
together. You know, all nationalities and all ethnicities can work together as long as you're a proud nationalist. We can all get behind it.
As long as you're a proud nationalist. Now, nationalist isn't just being patriotic. Nationalism is a specific political system. See, nationalism. Identification with one's own nation and support for its interests, especially to the exclusion or detriment of the interests of other nations. Advocacy or support of the political independence of political nation or people. So yeah, I don't think that we should be preferencing our nation's interests over that of our nations. I think we should be coalition building with other nations in the Pacific area. Nationalism is also, in general, just a very loaded term. It's led to some pretty bad shit.
Each other and you know, continue to make this country, you know, a little bit better perhaps. So that's a good thing. So happy Australia Day to everybody, and you know, support the day and tell the left to go piss off.
You piss off yourself, mate. In short, fuck Invasion Day. It's a load of horse shit, and this guy is really happy, confidently speaking about things that he's actually not got much information on or active misinformation.